This is the research I was managed to compile for the vaccines, breakthroughs for leishmaniasis and leprosy. Though mainly, there's a lot more research on leishmaniasis, and then I also have all these tabs open, also on Google Chrome that are a bunch of the sources that I looked at that were like secondary to the ones that you sent me. So just to start off, I wanted to go a little bit over the population and who is like really affected by this illness and why probably there's not a lot of research on it, but why there should be more research that is really focusing on these illnesses. So who is the populations living in similar areas who have limited access to medical resources? They are usually living in low socioeconomic status areas, poor rural areas in South America, the Middle East that have tropical climates. There's a lot of countries in the Middle East and Asia who are also affected by these illnesses, who do not have the resources to either get clinics where they can get um, chemotherapy or antibacterial help. So it's transmitted through infected sandflies that spread the disease. Another reason that poor rural areas also have a high prevalence of these illness is because um, flies and the mosquitoes especially live in areas that are rural and also where there are a lot of bodies of like standing, like still water, or where there can be a lot of like high populations of people. And so risk factors is living in an urban area, like I said, poor rural areas are also urban areas, being part of a low socioeconomic status, and environmental factors. If you combine all three of these together, you're definitely at a greater disadvantage. Just being where you're living and who you are, these risk factors are just going to make it way easier for you to get the disease, but also make it way harder for you to find treatment. So I was looking a little further into the history of how the vaccine or vaccines have been developed since I have found that there are actually a lot of them in clinical trials right now. Um, so it started in the 1940s, kind of how like smallpox started with inoculations. So leishmaniasis actually had a period where people were inoculating patients. However, this was highly dangerous and not very effective because putting the tiny bit of like a non of a sore and inserting it into someone else was actually just an easier way for it to spread because leishmaniasis wasn't really a good disease to have inoculation with. It was a little too contagious, but it was also really hard to end up treating, especially in these rural areas. By 1972, there was a developed immunotherapy vaccination that was going through clinical trials. And in 1980s to present, there are vaccines that can be as efficient with less side effects than chemo at treating diseases. However, these vaccines have not been like used worldwide. They haven't passed all of the trials that make them FDA approved or WHO approved. So there is still more research to be done in order to uh, get this vaccine out into the world, but also get it to more people as possible. Right now, a lot of these vaccines are very much concentrated in areas that like that specific research is taking place in. So I also found like there's this vaccine that's specifically being developed in India right now, but the only people who are part of those clinical trials, of course, are those living in India. So nobody else gets to participate or gets to see what the effects of that might be just yet. A good thing about the vaccines, though, is that they have better side effects than chemo, but are currently having equally good rates for curing the disease. So, to look a little bit about the mechanism, or what I at least found was the mechanism and how it works, there are different types of vaccines currently in development, ranging from live attenuated to antigen cocktails. So, live attenuated is not going to be like the immuno vaccine that I was looking at specifically, but they're going to be safer versions of the inoculated vaccine that happened in 1940s. There's also a killed leishmania vaccine that is becoming a strong candidate because it has a stable biochemical composition, but it also has the antigens, which means that it has low cost, but it's also relatively safe for the population. There's also a lot of vaccines that are being used actually right now to help with canines or with animals that also are part of the vectors that transmit disease. So a lot of scientists think that if they can stop that transmitting vector, they can actually end up stopping leishmaniasis from being spread. And that way you're also not having like human trials just yet, but you're also still helping the population by vaccinating other mammals or canines specifically with purified versions of this disease that is going to help them stop the spread. So I made a little flow chart about the mechanisms. So the vaccine that I was looking at is a combination of heat-killed leishmania, amazonensis, and the live BCG, which is used to treat tuberculosis. So in the beginning, it's biological molecules that combine with drug modulate immune response toward protective type. So what this vaccine is basically doing um, is telling your immune system to wake up and be able to fight it itself. It's not really saying like, oh, we're going to go in and cure everything. It's saying, okay, we have the tools to target specific cells, and it's going to target CD4B Th1 cells so they can generate interferon, which is what's going to end up telling your body what to target and how to target it in order to fight the disease. This is not a like cure all, like you get one shot and you're cured. It's you get these shots and you still have to, do the wrappings. You still have to have sometimes antibacterial supplements in order to like eventually get cured of leishmaniasis, but it is a more effective way and like a safer way. So by activation of the vaccine is parasitize macrophage to kill the intercellular leishmania. So in conclusion, was something that I found in a lot of these research articles is that this is a really good beginning, but there has to be a further look into the Th1 and Th2 paradigm. So this specific vaccine is targeting the Th1 cells. But there is a lot more to be said about like what the Th2 cell might do, how many other factors are involved in targeting these like generate interferons, which can activate the macrophages. But then what I found something really interesting is there are key elements that they're looking at when they're developing these vaccines, and these are kind of the elements that they started all of this with, and they're the elements that after their conclusion they want to make sure they've covered. And it's that antigens, they want antigens to generate a pathogen specific response, and they also want adjacent to initiate and direct the immune response. So like I said, this proves that when they're going into this, they're not looking for an end all be all cure. They're really looking for a way to make your immune system be able to generate the response that they want, but also to have like a chain of events and kind of make it go down so that one thing triggers another and you end up being able to fight the disease. So a small comparison on how it compares to other treatments. It has 0 to mild side effects, which chemotherapy doesn't have. It has a lower opportunity cost in the sense that when you're getting vaccinated, you do not have to be at a doctor's office for a long period of time getting really intensive treatment with like chemotherapy. And with chemotherapy, you also have the chance of having to miss work because you're going to have moderate to severe side effects. So the opportunity cost for vaccines is way higher. It's way lower. And it means that people, especially like I said from the first slide, there are people in rural areas and low socioeconomic status who are really getting severely affected by these diseases. And with a lower opportunity cost, they're going to be able to keep going on about their lives when chemotherapy might have slowed them down. Another important thing to consider is that it's cheaper, not only for the person receiving the treatment, but for clinics. So if you have a very small clinic in especially these rural areas, that clinic won't have to pay a lot to get that treatment in, but it also won't have to charge their patients a lot in order to get the treatment. However, I will say that there is a benefit to chemo right now. It is that all the chemo treatments are out of clinical trials while vaccines are still in the process of being developed. They're not fully out of trials just yet, and there's still so many things that are being researched about it. So a lot of the information that we have are trials that are seen in smaller scales. There's not really like one vaccine that has been tested worldwide to know what we would have to do in order to make all the tweaks to help everybody. And this is just a list of all of my references.